Well, Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy met with the president of Taiwan, also known as the Republic of China, in California today at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. And I have mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, I do like Taiwan. I think it's one of the better countries in the world. I'd rather, if I had to be born somewhere other than the United States, I think I'd rather be born into Taiwan before anywhere in Europe. Save for maybe Italy, Switzerland, Liechtenstein. But Taiwan is certainly better than, I'd say, at least 90% of the countries on the planet. So I don't wish them any ill will. I won't be happy the day that the Chinese People's Liberation Army lands on Taiwan to quote-unquote liberate them. I won't be, cheering when Xi Jinping gives a big speech in Taipei, announcing a new era in which, China is fully unified once again, and that the Western imperialists have been vanquished. I don't want any of that to happen at all. But the fact of the matter is that the status quo, which was in place for some 50 years, in which the U.S. was not very overtly pro-Taiwan, in which the U.S. and the Chinese did not have any real public bouts of disagreement over Taiwan, where the Chinese could always say, hey, we'll get Taiwan back at some point, when we have time. We're just busy doing other things, but that's a part of our country, and we'll go retake it, at some later date. That seemed pretty stable. Is it the best situation in the world? No, but it seemed pretty stable. It held for many decades, and then all of a sudden, I started to see rumblings of it when Trump was still president, but it kicked into high gear once Biden got in. U.S. politicians, for some reason now, want to be overt in their support of de jure Taiwanese independence. Now, Taiwan has been de facto independent from China since 1949, and that's because the nationalist forces, which were vanquished by the communists in the Chinese Civil War, they all fled to Taiwan, and that was the last readout of nationalist China. And so there was essentially a North versus South Korea dynamic, or an East-West Germany dynamic, to where the nationalist Chinese on Taiwan claimed sovereignty over all of mainland China as well as Taiwan, and the communists in Nanking, later renamed Beijing, they claimed sovereignty over all of mainland China as well as the island of Taiwan. These were mutually exclusive claims, and they just sort of agreed to disagree, much in the same way that you have North and South Korea that pretty much have to agree to disagree. Each side claims sovereignty over the entirety of the Korean peninsula, and that's just not going to happen. And so I'm not entirely sure who started it, who started the escalation, this march towards a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. You can blame Xi and the party in Beijing, but at the same time, I don't feel like the American political establishment has made much of an effort to dial things down. I don't think that they're trying to push back against Xi in the other direction and say, hey, simmer down, the status quo was working, let's not get crazy here. It seems to me like the response from the United States has been across the board, even if it's somewhat tepid. If we're going to give any response to this at all, we're going to say we think that Taiwan should be de jure independent from China, that there should be a hard divorce, and that the door to Taiwan reunifying with mainland China, that door should be slammed shut, and Taiwan should just be an independent country. Now, the Chinese certainly would not allow this to happen. It is one of the furthest things from their national security interests, as well as their economic interests. Taiwan and China have extensive economic ties, which might seem strange considering they don't recognize each other's existence. But somehow they've been able to make it work. Some of you may have heard of Foxconn, the company that makes the iPhones in China, that has nets outside the factories, to catch the workers who often try to commit suicide because working at the iPhone factory is just such a terrible life for them. Foxconn is a Taiwanese company, so these are not minor ties. Taiwan is a semiconductor superstate. They're a major player in the tech industry, and from the perspective of the U.S. or China, Taiwan is rightfully seen as an essential trading partner. Moreover, Taiwan is just off the coast of China. It's a big island, and China does not want a hostile state just off of its coast. They don't need any more big islands hosting U.S. troops, such as Okinawa. Taiwan is even closer. In fact, if you kind of look on a map, it looks like Taiwan is geographically kind of part of the same island chain as Japan and Okinawa and all those. It looks like if you follow from Taiwan, you can just sort of follow up a line, and it's a curve that flows, right through Japan and all the Japanese islands. In fact, Taiwan used to be a Japanese island. The Japanese felt that it was their right to rule Taiwan, and it was a part of the Japanese Empire until the end of World War II. It was under Japanese rule for some 50 years. In fact, if you don't count nationalist China's brief reunification with Taiwan after the Second World War, so this would be 1945 to 1949, if you cut out those 4 years, Taiwan has not been connected politically to mainland China since the late 19th century. It was the 1890s, the last time that Taiwan was really a part of China. The period of the Chinese Civil War was, very tumultuous, as you might imagine, and I don't think it's really fair to consider that those 4 years as Taiwan really being a part of China. What was China was very much up for debate during those 4 years. Everything was up for grabs, and so you could consider Taiwan to be sort of in this very unstable state, along with all of these other territories. And so I say all this just to justify my point that I would not be thrilled on a personal level if Taiwan were to be absorbed into communist China. But at the same time, I have no interest personally, economically, patriotically, none of that in getting involved in a conflict between Taiwan and China. And even though I want that conflict avoided, and I wish that the situation never escalated to that point, I don't think that what our politicians are doing, whether it's Kevin McCarthy or Nancy Pelosi, they both have the same policy on Taiwan. Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan personally. Now Kevin McCarthy's meeting with their president in California. I don't think any of this helps. I think that Taiwan's being led down the same primrose path as Ukraine. Taiwan is being encouraged to be to have an adversarial relationship with Beijing, and that's not going to end well for them, plain and simple. maybe Taiwan is being whispered sweet nothings. Maybe they're being led to believe that the United States will have their back if some kind of war were to break out. But that's simply not the case. If the U.S. were to become overly involved in a war between Taiwan and China, I mean, here's the thing. Taiwan would be wiped out anyway. Taiwan's a very small, relatively speaking, to China, very small place. It would get destroyed just like Ukraine's being destroyed. Now, Ukraine, it's taking a little longer, but, you know, make no mistake, if you're actually in Ukraine, it's not a place you want to be. The country's destroyed. Okay, buildings leveled everywhere. Their society's completely broken down. Ukraine's over. It's done. And frankly, I would hate to see that to happen to any country. Same goes for Taiwan. And so the only rational decision for Taiwan, once some sort of conflict were to arise, would be to surrender to China immediately to avoid having their entire civilization wiped off the face of the earth. But I would rather see them avoid that as well. And I don't think that this is the way to avoid it. Acting tougher towards China is not the way to avoid this conflict. I think that they need to be pacified just as they have been for so many decades. And you know what? Maybe appeasement isn't going to work anymore, but it's the only option. It might just be that we're at the point where that sort of appeasement towards Beijing doesn't work. That this whole thing of, oh yeah, Beijing, we recognize you're totally sovereign over Taiwan, but you know, don't attack Taiwan. Maybe Xi is just not playing that game anymore, and if that's the case, nothing can be done about it. But resisting Beijing militarily is a non-starter. And you know, once some kind of a conflict breaks out, the United States will be on the hook for the bill. And frankly, we'll be lucky if we don't get ourselves nuked. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.